Welcome to the Human Archive. If you enjoy original science fiction stories about humanity finding its place among the stars, subscribe and join us for the next one. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Cosmic Roadmap. Chief Cartographer Rosic Tam had spent 84 years teaching navigators that civilization began where improvisation ended. Space was not a road, a sea, or empty. It was gravity wells, radiation fields, unstable stars, subspace discontinuities, magnetic storms, and enough invisible hazards to kill an inattentive crew before they understood they had made a mistake. The Concordance Atlas existed because billions of travelers did not deserve to rediscover those mistakes personally. Rosic stood before a class of junior cartographers and expanded the galactic transit map across the lecture chamber. Bright lines joined inhabited systems. Green routes marked tested corridors, amber marked conditional hazards, red meant restricted, and black meant something else. A dark circle appeared around Nadir Crown. The rapidly rotating black hole had no nearby civilization, no active station, and no recognized transit corridor within its exclusion zone. One student raised a hand. "Chief, why is the margin around Nadir Crown wider than the standard high curvature restriction?" Historical losses. Rosic enlarged the archive layer. 6 ancient vessel markers appeared, then 12 appeared, and finally 31. Most were thousands of years old. Early faster-than-light systems were tested near high-curvature objects, he explained. Engineers believed stronger gravitational geometry might improve transition efficiency. They were correct. Several students leaned forward. Rosic let the silence grow. They were also dead. A few ears flattened. Extreme curvature destabilizes conventional shear envelopes. One side of the field experiences spacetime differently from the other. The envelope attempts to restore symmetry. That correction can induce torsion, navigation divergence, and catastrophic collapse. He reduced the archive. That is why the atlas does not merely say dangerous. The word appeared over Nadir Crown, impassable. It says no. The lesson ended 11 minutes later. Rosic returned to his office and found a new route certification application waiting. He almost forwarded it to his deputy. Then he saw the applicant, Human Transit Development Authority. In Rosic's experience, that was usually a warning. The Human Transit Development Authority had a particular reputation in his office. Its applications were never casual. They arrived with immense technical appendices, unusually candid failure reports, and one central idea that made the first page look insane. Rosic had learned that dismissing the first page before reading the appendix was dangerous to his dignity. He opened the proposal. The requested corridor passed directly through the Nadir Crown exclusion zone. Rosic stared at it, then checked the submission coordinates, perhaps a transcription error. The coordinates were correct. The proposed route approached the black hole on a prograde vector close enough that no certified civilian drive would remain stable. Rosic read the project name. Black Meridian Curvature-Assisted Transit Corridor. He closed the file, opened it again. The route was still there. His assistant appeared at the doorway. "Chief, find the human responsible for this." "For what?" Rosic projected the map. His assistant's expression changed. "Oh. Yes. I'll contact them. Today." The human arrived 3 hours later carrying a tablet and a cup of coffee. Dr. Yvette Halden looked at the black circle surrounding Nadir Crown and smiled as if seeing an old acquaintance. Rosic decided immediately that this meeting would be exhausting. Chapter 2. Black holes are not roads. "Black holes are not transit corridors," Rosic said. Yvette nodded. "Correct." He waited. She did not elaborate. Rosic pointed toward Nadir Crown. "Your application requests certification of a transit corridor inside a region where standard shear drives become unstable." "Also correct." "You therefore agree that the route is prohibited?" "No." Rosic stared at her. Yvette tapped the projection. "They're not transit corridors." She traced a line toward the black hole. "They're launch infrastructure." Rosic closed his eyes briefly. "Dr. Halden." "Chief Cartographer." "You understand frame dragging?" "Yes." "Ergospheric geometry?" "Yes." "Historical shear envelope failures?" "Yes." "This has been attempted before." "I know," Yvette's expression lost its amusement. "We have the casualty files." That stopped him. Rosic had expected arrogance. Instead, she opened a historical archive. Vessels lost around neutron stars, ships torn apart near black holes. Prototype drives recovered as expanding clouds of debris. Humans had translated the original engineering reports, not merely the summaries. Yvette brought up one ancient failure. The old drives all did the same thing. They failed. They fought the curvature. Rosic frowned. She displayed a conventional transit envelope. The conventional transit envelope was smooth, balanced, and nearly symmetrical. Then she placed it near a rotating black hole. The field warped. Control systems compensated. The compensation grew stronger. Then the simulation collapsed. We've spent generations designing drives to reject local gravitational asymmetry, Yvette said. That works almost everywhere. Near a Care black hole, rejection becomes the failure mode. Rosic studied the model. What do you propose instead? Stop rejecting it. The human drive appeared. Its envelope was divided into independently controlled sectors. Each segment can carry a different field state. During approach, we let the black hole's frame dragging deform the envelope. You deliberately create asymmetry. We deliberately manage asymmetry, which the Concordance Atlas classifies as a precursor to catastrophic field collapse. In conventional drives, Yvette changed the simulation. One sector advanced. Another lagged. The field twisted. Instead of collapsing, it formed a directional gradient. We used the distortion to build the transit vector. Rosic watched. The concept was offensive, elegant, and worst of all, mathematically coherent. You intend to use the rotational geometry of the black hole to energize an FTL launch. Yes. You are proposing a gravitational slingshot for spacetime. That's the simplified version. Rosic studied the displayed route. How long have you been developing this? 9 years. He turned 9. Yvette nodded. Current hardware generation is 6. You have hardware? Yes. Have you tested it? Yes. Rosic felt unease arrive slowly. How many times? Yvette took a drink of coffee. 312 probe missions. The room went very quiet. Rosic asked, and you decided certification should be the first time anyone in the authority hears about this. Oh, your research division knew. My research division apparently desires death. That seems harsh. Did the probes survive? Yvette looked at him. Depends which ones. Rosic stopped. The human smiled faintly. You should come see the test program. He did. Chapter 3. 312 probes. The human facility around Nadir Crown was far more cautious than Rosic expected. That irritated him. He had prepared himself for recklessness. Instead, he found redundant tracking arrays, remote observatories, automated abort systems, and enough independent telemetry channels to satisfy a military navigation board. No crewed vessel had approached the exclusion boundary. No human pilot had been allowed near the experimental profile. The first probes had never come close to Nadir Crown either. Probe 1 tested sector control synchronization in ordinary space. Probe 7 deliberately overloaded a field segment until it collapsed. Probe 32 tested sensor latency. Probe 51 was destroyed when an asymmetric envelope tore itself open. Probe 52 repeated the test with different timing and survived. Some probes were sacrificed deliberately. Each sacrificed probe had a narrow purpose. One established how much sensor latency the controller could tolerate before an apparently stable sector became unrecoverable. Another proved that a coolant loop could remain technically within temperature limits while its response time became too slow for a second correction. The team did not record only whether a probe lived or died. They recorded the boundary that separated the two. Rosic recognized the method immediately. It was cartography, only the terrain was failure. Humans pushed individual components beyond limits to learn exactly where those limits lived. Rosic stood inside the control gallery with Yvette while rows of archived test runs played across the wall. You destroyed functioning equipment on purpose. We destroyed experimental equipment on purpose. That distinction exists mainly in budget documents. Yvette smiled. Now you're thinking like a human administrator. Rosic ignored her. Probe 109 had suffered complete navigation loss. Probe 147 had survived the approach, but re-entered normal space with enough angular error that recovery took 3 days. Probe 188 lost 2 envelope sectors. Probe 233 completed a partial curvature-assisted launch. Probe 271 nearly succeeded but overheated its field junctions. Rosick looked at the total. 312. Yes. How many completed the full intended profile? Yvette became quiet. 1. Rosick turned. 1. So far. He stared at her. You are requesting approval for a crude test based on 1 successful complete probe run. Based on 312 probe runs, one of which completed the full profile. That is not how anyone else would phrase that. Probably why you're here. Rosick folded his arms. Show me. Yvette brought up probe 312. Before I do, you need to understand something. I am listening. The first 311 weren't attempts to succeed. Rosick frowned. Many were attempts to fail in specific ways. She displayed a multi-dimensional failure map. The failure map tracked field asymmetry, thermal load, sensor delay, trajectory error, and tidal differential. Rosick saw colored volumes surrounding a narrow region of survivable operation. We built this by breaking probes, Yvette said. Every failure closed off part of the map. We weren't throwing machines into a black hole and hoping. Rosick looked at the thin, safe corridor. You were teaching yourselves precisely how hope becomes irrelevant. Yvette considered that. That's actually pretty good. He wished she had disliked it. Probe 312. She started the recording. Chapter 4. The first one comes back. Probe 312 approached Nadir Crown from the prograde side. Even in simulation, the black hole distorted everything around it. Background stars warped into arcs. A pale ring of lensed light curled around darkness. The probe's instruments reported increasing frame dragging. Rosick watched the standard warnings appear: curvature limit, shear envelope instability, automatic transit abort recommended. Then the warnings became red. A conventional drive would already have disengaged. Probe 312 continued. Rosick saw the field distort. Sector 1 advanced relative to the vessel. Sector 3 lagged. The asymmetry should have triggered catastrophic correction. It did not. The probe allowed the mismatch, measured it, fed it back into the sector controls. Frame dragging increased. The black hole pulled spacetime itself around the rotation axis. The human field changed with it. Rosick leaned closer. They are not counteracting the precession. No. They are using it to align the forward gradient. Yes. The field twisted further. Rosick's skin tightened. A number on the display crossed a threshold no concordance vessel was allowed to approach. Then probe 312 accelerated, not physically in the ordinary sense. The transit envelope sharpened. Energy climbed through the sectors. The vessel seemed to slide sideways across the image. Then it vanished. Rosick waited for the destruction report. None came. The recording skipped ahead. A distant observatory received a beacon 47 seconds later. Probe 312 had emerged more than a dozen light-years away. Rosick checked the timestamps. He checked them again. Impossible. Yvette shook her head. No, just fast. Conventional transit would require much longer. Rosick ran the numbers. The black hole had contributed energy to the transit interaction, not enough to violate conservation. The field had extracted a microscopic quantity of rotational energy in a process analogous to Penrose's extraction, then used the extreme geometry as part of the launch. The mathematics held. He hated that. You did it. Yvette did not smile. A probe did. And now you want to put people aboard. Eventually. Rosick studied her. You are less excited than I expected. Probe 312 still had a Sector 4 transient we don't like. He looked at the data. The sector had remained within tolerance. He understood them, though only barely. Yvette continued. We can get a machine through. That doesn't mean I'm putting people in it tomorrow. Rosick's assessment of humanity changed slightly. It was not enough, but it changed slightly. Then he met Commander Althea Kettering. It changed again. Chapter 5. The dangerous part is coming home. Althea Kettering rejected the first crude profile in under 7 minutes. Rosick sat on the review board expecting argument. The pilot looked through the abort conditions, asked 3 questions, and pushed the tablet back toward Yvette. No. Yvette nodded. Rosick blinked. There was no debate, no accusation of cowardice, and no appeal to human courage. Yvette simply asked, Sector 4. Althea pointed. The math says I can get in. It doesn't say I can get out if Sector 4 fails after closest approach. We can cross-feed from Sector 2. Not fast enough. Yvette looked at the engineering team. She's right. The test was postponed. Rosick found that almost disturbing. You delayed the program immediately. Yvette looked at him. Yes. I had expected Commander Kettering to accept the risk. Althea leaned back in her chair. Why? Human reputation. That bad? Variable. Althea smiled. I'm a rescue pilot, Chief. My job is coming back. The redesign took 11 weeks. Those 11 weeks changed Rosick's opinion of Althea more than any successful flight could have. She sat through failure reviews, repeated emergency egress drills, and rejected 2 simulator profiles because the recovery logic depended on a sensor that shared a power bus with the system it was meant to back up. Nobody accused her of delaying history. Yvette thanked her for finding the weakness before gravity did. Sector 4 received an independent control path, a redundant coolant circuit, and an emergency isolation gate. Althea reviewed the new design and approved it conditionally. Rosick began attending more meetings. He told himself this was due diligence. In truth, the Black Meridian project had become difficult to ignore. Every part of it looked dangerous. Every dangerous part had someone assigned to quantify it. The crewed vessel, Merbius Wake, took shape around a reinforced transit core. Its hull was not particularly large. Its drive was. The ship carried independent field controllers, triple redundant curvature sensors, local tidal monitoring, and enough automated abort logic to make Rosick almost comfortable. Almost. During one review, he asked Yvette, why build this at all? She looked up from the telemetry model. There are safe routes. Yes. Proven routes. Yes. You could spend a century improving their efficiency. We probably will. Then why Nadir Crown? Yvette looked at the black hole turning silently on the display. Because safe paths aren't always fast enough. Rosick heard the answer. He did not understand it yet. 4 days later, Ortholian sent a distress call. Chapter 6. 6 hours. The certification hearing stopped halfway through an argument about civilian licensing. A priority alarm replaced the route simulation. Orthelion system emergency. Rosick stood. The report arrived in pieces because Ortholian's long-range beacon had been damaged. Extreme stellar magnetic activity. Multiple coronal events. Orbital collectors disabled. 3 artificial magnetic shield stations around Ortholian 3 damaged. The moon's population depended on those stations to reduce radiation exposure produced by its environment around the system's giant primary. Replacement superconducting field cores existed. Not in Ortholian. The nearest compatible cores were stored aboard a Union engineering tender. Conventional transit time. 17 days. Projected time before shielding degradation crossed catastrophic exposure threshold. 5 hours, 48 minutes. No one in the hearing room spoke. Rosick enlarged the map. Ortholian lay on the far side of the Nadir Crown exclusion region. The conventional route curved around thousands of light years of unsafe transit geometry. The proposed Black Meridian route cut directly across that detour. Althea was the first to ask, how long? A navigation officer ran the experimental profile. From here to Ortholian using Nadir Crown assist, approximately 43 minutes after launch. The room changed. Rosick heard Yvette inhale. Nobody celebrated. That mattered. This was not how the first crude test was supposed to happen. The authority chair looked at Rosick. You are the route certifier. He disliked the weight of that sentence. The profile is not certified. Can the ship fly it? Rosick looked at Yvette. She did not answer for him. Althea did. We can fly the tested envelope. Safely. The pilot's expression hardened. No one should use that word today. Rosick appreciated that. Yvette brought up the latest simulations. The crude profile has passed all ground validations. Sector 4 redundancy is complete. We have not performed the crude skim. And if we do nothing? Rosick already knew. Millions of people would absorb radiation their infrastructure had been designed to prevent. Some would survive. Ortholian's emergency planners sent projected shelter capacities and dose curves. Hospitals could move the most vulnerable underground. Industrial districts could shut down and evacuate workers. But the shielding stations protected infrastructure spread across the moon, not just people who could fit in bunkers. If the field failed completely, the crisis would not end when the coronal event passed. Power systems, agriculture, water processing, and orbital transport would all absorb damage at once. The casualty number was only the first column. Many would not. He remembered Yvette's answer. Safe paths aren't always fast enough. Now he understood. Chapter 7. Permission. The go or no-go review lasted 31 minutes. Rosic had never disliked efficiency more. Merbius Wake underwent a complete diagnostic. The diagnostic covered drive sectors, coolant loops, curvature sensors, hull stresses, emergency reentry, and radiation shielding. The 3 replacement field cores were transferred aboard. Althea reviewed every abort window. Yvette reviewed every parameter against probe 312 and later partial tests. The Ortholian government sent formal acceptance of the risk. No one ordered the human crew aboard. Every crew member volunteered. Volunteering did not mean the crew could ignore mission control. Rosic insisted on that distinction. Each specialist signed the same abort authority matrix. Althea could terminate for flight risk, Yvette for field instability, the chief engineer for thermal or structural limits, and mission control for tracking confidence. No vote could override a red line abort. If any one of those authorities called it, the mission ended. Humanity could choose danger. It could not choose to pretend danger had vanished. Rosic interviewed Althea personally. You understand this is still experimental? Yes. You understand probe 312 is the only full-profile success? Yes. You understand that if a parameter moves outside the tested envelope, there may be no recovery? Yes. He leaned forward. If any parameter exceeds the test envelope, you abort. Althea nodded. That's the plan. Rosic stared at her. Humans keep saying that immediately before doing something alarming. She smiled. Then imagine how alarming the things we reject are. Against his will, Rosic laughed. The sound did not last long. Launch Control requested authorization. Rosic looked at the route. For thousands of years, the Concordance Atlas had prevented ships from approaching Nadir Crown. That warning had saved lives. He did not believe it had been wrong. Rules were written for technologies that existed when the rules were made. The question before him was whether a new machine had changed the answer. He authorized the flight. Merbius Wake, experimental transit clearance granted. Althea's voice came through the channel. Copy. Rosic added, come back. There was a brief pause, then Althea answered more softly. That's the plan too. Chapter 8. Merbius Wake. Rosic remained in mission control. He had no desire to prove anything personally. Merbius Wake accelerated toward Nadir Crown. At first, the black hole appeared as an absence. Then gravitational lensing grew strong enough to reshape the stars behind it. Light bent into arcs. Clock comparisons between the ship and mission control began diverging by small amounts. Navigation corrections became increasingly dependent on local ship measurements, because signal delay and relativistic effects made remote guidance less useful. Rosic listened to Althea's voice. She became quieter as danger increased. Humans often did that. The loud ones were rarely the professionals. Approach checkpoint 3, Althea said. All sectors stable. Yvette answered from the physics station aboard ship. Curvature solution matches predicted range. Mission control tracked them. Every operator knew the next few minutes might end with nothing but telemetry. Rosic watched the exclusion boundary approach. The Atlas still labeled the region impassable. Merbius Wake crossed it. No alarm sounded in the room. The ship systems provided plenty. Frame gradient increasing. Sector temperatures nominal. Local lensing solution good. Abort corridor Alpha remains open. The black hole grew across the display, not as an object but as distorted geometry. Rosic felt his body responding irrationally. There was no physical danger in mission control. His pulse accelerated anyway. Merbius Wake entered the final approach. Althea said, beginning sector activation. Althea brought the 4 sectors online in sequence. The transit envelope formed. Asymmetry climbed. Red warnings appeared. Rosic's instincts screamed abort. Yvette said calmly, expected. More warnings, expected. Then an external sensor registered a plasma filament. The plasma filament was small, faint, and unmodeled. Rosic leaned forward. The filament crossed the planned approach vector. Navigation recalculated. The projected trajectory shifted. Althea said, "That's outside primary solution." Yvette answered, "Agreed." The abort timer appeared, 22 seconds. Rosic waited for them to leave. Chapter 9. The skim. "We can still abort," Althea said. No one argued. That mattered. Yvette ran the altered plasma geometry through the drive model. Rosic watched values change. The filament itself would not damage the ship. Its electromagnetic effect slightly altered the field measurement confidence at exactly the wrong moment. The planned sector timing no longer produced the ideal transit vector. "Abort window 17 seconds, an operator called. Rosic opened his mouth. Yvette spoke first. "Secondary profile exists." Althea asked, tested. Probe 287 and 301 entered the timing range. Neither ran the full transit. Margins. Inside validated sector load. Higher thermal transient on 3. Rosic looked at the numbers. Dangerous. Rosic checked the secondary profile provenance himself. Probe 287 had entered the relevant timing range and lost navigation after a sensor fault unrelated to the field state. Probe 301 had completed the same sector asymmetry, but aborted before rotational coupling because its thermal margin was intentionally conservative. No probe had flown the exact combination Althea now faced, but every individual parameter had existed inside a validated test. That was the thin line between improvisation and gambling, not unknown. The distinction was everything. Abort window 12 seconds. Althea said, "If we leave now, can we reach Ortholian conventionally?" Silence. Everyone knew the answer. No, Althea did not ask what happened to the moon. She knew. Yvette. "Secondary profile is within test envelope." "Recommendation." A pause. "Proceed." Althea answered immediately. "Secondary profile, execute." Rosic did not feel relief. The humans had not chosen courage over safety. If the secondary profile had crossed an untested load, Althea would have aborted and Ortholian would have suffered the consequences. Rosic believed that now. That belief made the decision easier to approve and harder to watch. The humans were not protected by recklessness. They were protected by the fact that they had already decided which risks they would refuse. They had chosen one quantified risk over a certain failure elsewhere. That distinction did nothing for Rosic's nerves. Möbius Wake adjusted its sector timing. Sector 1 advanced by a fraction. Sector 3 lagged. The field asymmetry increased. Traditional abort software would have killed the drive instantly. The human system accepted the values. The ship moved deeper into frame-dragged spacetime. Closest approach in 9 seconds. Rosic stopped breathing. Nadir Crown distorted the star field until there was no intuitive sense of direction. The black hole spun. Spacetime went with it, and the human ship let itself be caught. Chapter 10. Ride the spin. Rosic had spent his career correcting distortion. Navigation was the art of finding the stable path through an unstable universe. What the humans did offended that entire philosophy. The black hole pulled one side of Möbius Wake's transit envelope forward. Sector 1 accelerated relative to Sector 3. The field twisted. Instead of fighting to restore symmetry, the drive increased the difference. Yvette's voice remained calm. Coupling stable. Althea said, "Build the vector." Transit energy climbed. The display passed values Rosic had never seen on a crewed vessel. The curvature-coupled system captured the black hole's rotation and converted the managed distortion into a directional field gradient. The ship was not falling through the horizon. It was not entering the singularity. It remained outside the point of no return. That fact did very little to comfort him. Sector 3 thermal load rising. Within secondary limit. Vector alignment 0.2 degrees low. Correcting. Rosic watched the field segments change independently. One pulled, one lagged, another damped tidal differential. The vessel's protected local geometry remained survivable while the outer transit envelope became something no conventional ship would willingly generate. Then the black hole gave them what they had come for. The rotational coupling peaked. Energy surged through the black sling drive. Möbius Wake appeared to tilt sideways through warped light. Althea said, "Launch." The ship vanished. Every display went blank. Rosic stood in a silent room. 1 second passed, then 5, then 10 with no beacon. At 20 seconds, there was still nothing. 43 seconds after launch, an incoming alert appeared, not from Möbius Wake, from Ortholian, unidentified transit emergence. Then the ship's identifier populated, Möbius Wake. Mission control erupted. Rozek did not. He stared at the timestamp. The human vessel had crossed a distance conventional navigation required 17 days to cover. Some slower relay copies of Ortholian's original distress transmission were still moving through the network. The rescue ship had effectively arrived before its own distress call finished reaching everyone. A controller in Ortholian came over the channel. "How did you get here?" Althia's answer came back through static. "Shortcut." Rozek sat down. His legs had stopped cooperating. Chapter 11. The Rescue. Arrival did not save Ortholian. The distinction mattered to Rozek. Black Meridian was not a miracle machine that solved the emergency. It delivered tools and people before the emergency's clock expired. Everything after arrival still depended on local technicians, shield engineers, pilots, power crews, and procedures that had existed long before the human ship appeared. It merely made saving Ortholian possible. The shielding network had degraded faster than predicted. One orbital station had lost remote control. Another was operating at barely half strength. The third had shut down automatically after its field core overheated. Möbius Wake carried 3 replacements. Althea detached the first cargo module within 6 minutes. Local Ortholian rescue craft met it. The second core went toward the crippled station. The third station did not respond. Rozek watched from mission control as Yvette coordinated with Ortholian engineers. The damaged station's original installation rails were twisted. The replacement core would not seat correctly. An alien technician suggested abandoning it and redistributing power. Yvette ran the numbers. "Won't be enough." Althea asked, "Can we power the station directly?" The engineer hesitated. "From what?" "Möbius Wake." Rozek leaned forward. The prototype's transit drive contained enormous power management capacity. Using it as a temporary station supply had never been part of the mission. Althea did not simply do it. She asked for structural limits. Yvette checked drive cooling. Ortholian engineers checked the station bus. Plan formed. Möbius Wake moved into position, cables connected. The ship's power system began feeding the damaged shield station. Meanwhile, local technicians installed the first replacement core. The planetary magnetic field strengthened. Radiation forecasts improved. Second core online. The moon's exposure curve fell again. Then the third station accepted temporary power from Möbius Wake. The shield geometry closed. The temporary power feed was ugly by every permanent installation standard. It used 2 adapters fabricated aboard Möbius Wake, a load schedule revised every 90 seconds, and a human engineer stationed at the disconnect because nobody trusted the improvised interface enough to automate it. It was also documented, monitored, and explicitly temporary. Rozek realized that human improvisation was rarely the absence of standards. At its best, it was a bridge between the standard that had failed and the standard they intended to build next. The shield geometry was not perfect, but it was enough. Rozek watched the catastrophic threshold move from minutes away to hours, then disappear entirely as the first 2 stations stabilized. Millions of lives changed from endangered to protected. No one in mission control cheered until Ortholian confirmed it. Then they did. Rozek looked at the black circle on the atlas. The shortcut had not fixed a shield. It had not installed a core. It had not solved an engineering problem on arrival. It had given competent people something no conventional route could provide. What the shortcut had delivered was time. Chapter 12. The route home. The Authority expected Möbius Wake to return by ordinary transit. Rozek considered that obvious. Yvette did not. Her image appeared from Ortholian after the emergency stabilized. "We need to run the return profile." Rozek stared at her. "You have already proven the drive." "We've proven one direction." "You have also nearly given me organ failure." "Noted." "The crew has completed an emergency mission." "Also noted." "Come home the safe way." Yvette shook her head. "If we do that, Black Meridian remains a demonstration. A road has to work both ways." Rozek hated the sentence because it was true. More importantly, the outbound run had produced excellent telemetry. The plasma filament that disrupted the initial solution had revealed weaknesses in sensor weighting. Humans adjusted the model. Sector 3's thermal spike was understood. Timing changed. The return profile was not identical. It was safer. Althea participated in the review from Ortholian. She rejected one proposed approach angle. Yvette altered it. The final plan remained dangerous, less dangerous than the first. Rosic approved it. Möbius Wake launched from Ortholian. The return transit took longer because the usable assist geometry on the Ortholian side differed from the outbound approach, requiring a longer setup before the ship could couple to Nadir Crown's rotation. Then the ship entered the mapped approach. Rosic watched again. This time fewer warnings appeared. The ones that did were expected. Field asymmetry rose. Coupling stabilized. The ship rode Nadir Crown's frame, dragging, and launched. 38 minutes later, a transit emergence formed outside the mission control perimeter. Möbius Wake appeared exactly where predicted. The ship returned alive with crew and drive intact. Althea opened the channel. Chief Cartographer. Rosic answered, yes. We came back. He closed his eyes. I noticed. Chapter 13. Rewrite the Atlas. The certification debate became worse after success. Before Möbius Wake, most officials could dismiss Black Meridian as experimental human madness. After Ortholian, half the galaxy wanted one immediately. The other half wanted it banned permanently. Rosic rejected both positions. A conventional drive attempting the same approach would still die. Nadir Crown remained dangerous. The technology had changed. The black hole had not. The Authority created a new route classification. Curvature-assisted transit corridor. Requirements filled pages. Approved drive architecture. Independent sector control. Live black hole spin monitoring. Mapped prograde approach vectors, triple redundant curvature sensors, automatic abort gates, crew certification, thermal margins, no conventional drive entry. Civilian routes would not open until thousands of additional unmanned and crewed test cycles were completed. First commercial standard also required route closure whenever Nadir Crown's surrounding plasma environment exceeded the tested envelope. That provision angered shipping companies almost immediately. Yvette defended it in the certification hearing herself. A highway through a black hole, she said, was still allowed to close for weather. Yvette accepted every restriction. That surprised several officials. It did not surprise Rosic anymore. One delegate asked why humanity was not protesting the delay. Yvette answered, because I'd like customers to survive. The room went quiet. Nadir Crown became the first certified site. Not every black hole qualified. Many spun too slowly. Some were surrounded by unstable accretion environments. Others had useless approach geometry. Several human survey proposals were rejected. One team celebrated a rejection because the data had saved them years of engineering. Rosic began to understand them. He understood them, though only barely. The most difficult administrative change came last. The Atlas. For thousands of years, Nadir Crown carried one word: impassable. Rosic removed it himself. His hand hesitated over the command, then he pressed. The warning disappeared. A bright transit line appeared instead. It curved toward the black hole, then away. He hated how wrong it looked. He also knew it was right. Chapter 14. The Human Highway. The Black Meridian opened to certified cargo traffic 4 years later. Passenger service followed only after additional years of cargo operation, route closures, abort testing, and independent safety review. Trade routes changed almost immediately. Systems once separated by weeks of transit became neighbors. Medical shipments crossed sectors in hours. Emergency response fleets repositioned faster. Remote colonies gained access to markets that had never been economically practical. Other civilizations licensed human curvature-coupled drive architecture. Humanity made a great deal of money. Rosic considered that predictable. The route's official name remained Nadir Crown Curvature-Assisted Corridor 1. Nobody called it that. Everyone called it the Human Highway. Rosic objected for the first year, then surrendered. He stood before a new class of junior cartographers and opened the atlas. One student pointed at Nadir Crown. "Chief, what symbol do we use for the new route?" Rosic looked at the bright line. "The ordinary transit symbol." The student looked confused. "But it uses a black hole." "Yes. Shouldn't it have a special hazard designation?" "It does, in the operational metadata. I mean on the primary chart." "No." The student stared. Rosic almost smiled. "It is a road now." The class went quiet. Rosic moved to the next lesson. He did not tell them that saying the sentence still felt wrong. Chapter 15. The Old Warning. Years later, Rosic visited the original Nadir Crown research station. Probe 312 hung in the main atrium. Recovered after its historic transit, battered and partially scorched, it looked disappointingly ordinary. Yvette met him beneath it. Her hair had more gray now. "So," she said, "still think the atlas was wrong." Rosic looked up at the probe. "No." That surprised her. He continued. "The warning was correct when it was written." Yvette nodded. "Good. Do not sound so pleased. I've been telling people that for years." Rosic glanced at her. "You once told me a warning label was a record of someone else's problem." "It is." "That sounds very much like disrespect for warnings." "No, it means read the warning, understand why it's there, then decide whether the underlying condition still applies." Rosic considered the old probe. He could accept that. He understood them, though only barely. What is humanity surveying now? Yvette looked away. "That was suspicious, Doctor." "Neutron stars." Rosic stared. She smiled. "Different project." "I am retiring." "No, you're not." "I may." "You'd be bored." Rosic hated that she was correct. Chapter 16. Private Highway. By the 20th anniversary of the Ortholian rescue, more than 10,000 successful transits had passed through Nadir Crown. No uncontrolled field collapse. No passenger fatalities. The record included several aborts, 2 route closures for environmental conditions, and 1 drive failure outside the assist corridor that was handled safely. The system worked because the humans had turned their audacity into procedure. What began as a segmented field rig and a graveyard of probes had become boring enough for insurers, freight schedulers, maintenance crews, and passenger regulators. Rosic considered that the true measure of success. Any species could produce one astonishing demonstration if it was willing to lose enough people. Humanity's achievement was building the demonstration into something ordinary people could use without needing to be heroic. Rosic appreciated that part most. The first generation had asked whether the black hole could become a road. The next generation mostly worried about maintenance schedules. That was how dangerous breakthroughs became civilization. Ortholian 3 sent an anniversary message every year. The first showed the rebuilt shielding stations. The 10th showed a school named after Möbius Wake. The 20th contained a recording from children whose grandparents had survived the original emergency. Rosic watched it alone. Then he opened the atlas. Nadir Crown remained exactly what it had always been. Nadir Crown remained dark, massive, and lethal to anyone careless enough to treat physics as optional. Around it ran a bright line used by thousands of ships. Humanity had not conquered the black hole. That phrasing had always annoyed Yvette. They had learned how to cooperate with a part of its danger. That, Rosic decided, was the human pattern he had been misreading for most of his career. They did not always make the universe safer before moving through it. Sometimes they learned the danger so precisely that safety could exist inside it. Rosic could live with that. Mostly he could live with it. Epilogue. Speed limit. Rosic finally traveled the Black Meridian at the age of 139. He immediately regretted it. The passenger vessel was fully certified. Its drive had completed 400 assist transits. The crew had thousands of hours of specialized training. None of this helped when Nadir Crown filled the observation display with warped starlight. Rosic gripped his seat. A human child nearby pressed both hands against the transparent screen. "Are we going into the black hole?" The child's parent laughed. "No, we're going around it." The child sounded disappointed. "Oh." Rosic stared at the family. Only a human child could be disappointed that a passenger liner was not entering an event horizon. A flight attendant noticed him gripping the armrests. "First time." Rosic drew himself up. "I helped certify this route." The attendant nodded. "That wasn't my question." Rosic looked away. The vessel entered the curvature assist approach. The field changed. He felt nothing physically dramatic. That almost made it worse. Outside, the stars stretched and curled around the rotating darkness. The passenger display illuminated. Black Meridian entry. Remain seated until transit stabilizes. Beneath it, someone had added another line. Yes, the speed limit is necessary. Rosic closed his eyes. Then the black hole caught the field. The ship rode the spin, and the stars became a road.